Number 10, the survivor. A roommate who survived the quadruple slaughters at the University of Idaho told police she saw a man in black clothes and a mask walking past her in her house on the night of the endings, and she stood frozen and in shock according to newly released court documents. The roommate said she didn't recognize the man, who walked toward the backsliding glass door at her off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. According to documents released some time ago, she locked herself in her room after seeing him, the documents said. Other chilling details revealed in the court documents include that the suspect's phone number was near the victim's house at least 12 times before the slaughters, at least as far back as August. But his phone was off when the slaughters unfolded. Two roommates, who police said are not suspects, survived the attacks in the early hours of November 13th. Later that morning, the roommates called friends over to their house because they thought one of the victims on the second floor had passed out and wasn't waking up, police said. Around noon, a 911 call from one of the roommates' phones requested help for an unconscious person, police said. Responders found University of Idaho students Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogan, and Ethan Chapin all stabbed. Number 9, he might have been trying to solve his own crime. The man charged with slaughtering 4 Idaho college students may have joined online chat groups to discuss some of the facts of the brutal slayings with internet sleuths. Brian Coburg might have been the person or persons making claims about the quadruple case, using the Facebook and Redditor handles Papa Roger and Inside Looking, according to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. Coffindaffer, who was tracking both accounts, says many of the allegations made by individual or individuals turned out to be factually accurate, causing her to think it could have been Brian. In 2 of the postings, the person or persons offered a correct timeline for the slaughters and mentioned the knife sheath left at the scene of the crime before police publicly released those details. Here's what one of the messages said, this time coming from the Inside Looking account. Speculation. Butcher parked behind the house, approached property from tree line, entered sliding door and left it open, committed executions and exited sliding door. 1 knife according to coroner's statement. Time of slaying approximately 3:20 in the morning to 3:40 in the morning, according to car fleeing the scene and on camera on Highway 8 approximately 3:45 in the morning. Vehicle left skid marks upon exit. Multiple details starting from when the user mentioned the butcher committed the executions then fled from the sliding door were correct. One user wrote underneath the Reddit post that the dude is solving his own crime, psycho, followed by a couple of emojis. Number 8, the timeline. Police believe the slaughters unfolded between 4 in the morning and 4:25 in the morning, according to the court documents. Kernodle got a DoorDash order at the house at about 4 a.m., according to the affidavit. One of the surviving roommates said she woke up around 4 a.m. from what sounded like Gonsalves playing with her dog in one of the 3rd floor bedrooms, according to the affidavit. A short time after, the roommate said she heard who she thought was Gonsalves say something to the effect of, "There's someone here," the document said. But that could have been Kernodle on her phone because records showed she was on TikTok at about 4:12 in the morning, the affidavit said. The roommate said she looked out of her bedroom but did not see anything when she heard the comment about someone being in the house, the document said. She opened her door a second time when she heard what she thought was crying coming from Kernodle's room. The roommate then said she heard a male voice say something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," according to the documents. The roommate said she opened the door again when she heard the crying, and that's when she saw the figure in the mask, the document said. She described the intruder as 5'10" or taller and not very muscular, but athletically built with bushy eyebrows, according to the documents. At about 4:17 a.m., a security camera less than 50 feet from Kernodle's room picked up sounds of a barking dog and distorted audio of what sounded like voices or a whimper, followed by a loud thud, according to the documents. Number 7, Coburg might have been bullied. Or was he the bully? At least one individual who knew Coburg when they were young recalled Coburg as being quite friendly, and that he was bullied by peers over his weight. He was bullied a lot. It started because of his weight, and it was mainly by females. He was pretty big. Sarah Healy, who attended elementary, middle, and high school with Coburg in Pleasant Valley, Pennsylvania, told People magazine. He was very quiet, very to himself. He was very into his books. He was really sweet and really quiet. Others who knew Coburg didn't recall him being bullied at all. Casey Arndt, who was 2 years ahead of Coburg in high school in Pleasant Valley, said she didn't remember Coburg ever being bullied and alleged that while Coburg was always nice to her, he actually bullied her brother at times. I know that he had anger issues and he would have outbursts and stuff. I never saw them face to face. My brother said that when Brian would get angry with him, he would kind of gaslight him and get physically aggressive, Casey, who's 28, told People. Brian never got physically aggressive with my brother, but he was kind of the person who would smash things or punch a wall or something like that. Makes sense why you probably don't know this, as being bullied might have been a motive for his crime, so he hid it. Number 6. The car. After the victims were discovered, authorities reviewed surveillance video from the area and saw the suspect's white Hyundai Elantra go by the victim's house 3 times before entering the area for a 4th time at 4:04 a.m., according to the documents. Police said they traced the car's travel that night back to near Pullman, Washington, where the suspect lived while attending Washington State University. Brian Coburg, who is accused of ending 4 University Idaho students, is escorted to an extradition hearing at the Monroe County Courthouse in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023. Coburg was a PhD student in Washington State's Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at the time of the slaughters. Washington State's campus is less than 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho. Moscow police asked law enforcement to look out for white Elantras, the affidavit said, and on November 29th, a Washington State University police officer searched cars that matched that description at the university and found one registered to Coburg. Coburg registered his white Elantra in Washington State on November 18th, 5 days after the slaughters, and received a new license plate according to the documents. The car had previously been registered in Pennsylvania, and his Pennsylvania plate was set to expire on November 30th. Number 5, he has a master's in criminal justice. DeSales University confirmed in a statement that Coburg was an alumni. Coburg received a bachelor's degree in 2020 and completed his graduate studies in June 2022. A message on the university website read, Coburg received a master's degree in criminal justice. We are devastated by this senseless tragedy. We also recognize the impact this news can have on our community's well-being. DeSales has expanded counseling services for students, faculty, and staff, the statement continued. As a Catholic Salesian community, we extend deep sympathy and prayers to the family and friends of the victims. While studying at DeSales, Coburg posted a since-deleted call on Reddit for ex-convicts to participate in what he said was a study sanctioned by the university on how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. One of his classmates at DeSales, Brittany Slavin, told the New York Times that Coburg seemed rather interested in serial slaughterers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class, but that his behavior didn't raise any red flags for her at the time. At the time, it seemed as if he was just a curious student, so if his questions felt odd, we didn't think much of it because it fit our curriculum, she explained. Casey Arndt recalled Coburg being interested in criminal justice when he was still in high school, but she believed his addiction delayed his plans to go to a college to study the subject. He definitely was interested in criminal justice back then, she said, and I'm seeing from other people now that from former friends and acquaintances and even teachers that said he was always interested in it, and he loved crime movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Number 4, his phone was being tracked. Coburg's phone was tracked heading to Moscow before the attack and as the driver of the white Elantra returned to Pullman. However, the phone was off from 2:47 in the morning to 4:48 in the morning, which is consistent with Coburg attempting to conceal his location during the quadruple endings, the document said. His phone was near the victim's house at least 12 times before the slaughters, at least as far back as August, the document said. All of those times except for one were late at night or early in the morning. The morning after the slaughters, he went near the house between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning, citing cell phone data. Number 3, who is he? Police said they learned Coburg applied for an internship with the Pullman Police in the fall of 2022, and in an essay he said he wanted to help rural law enforcement agencies with how to better collect and analyze technological data in public safety operations. Coburg also posted a Reddit survey which asked for participants to provide information to understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision making when committing a crime. This was cited earlier. Coburg appeared in court in Pennsylvania on the first-degree slaughter and burglary charges and agreed to be extradited to Idaho, where he is now in custody. Coburg's attorney in Pennsylvania, Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason Labar, said in a statement his client was eager to be exonerated of these charges. Coburg appeared in court in Moscow. Kaylee Gonsalves' parents stared down Coburg as he entered the courtroom in a bright orange jumpsuit and no shackles. Brian Coburg, who is accused of ending 4 University of Idaho students in November 2022, looks toward his attorney, public defender Ann Taylor. During a hearing in Latah County District Court, January 5, 2023, in Moscow, Idaho. Coburg, whose skinny shoulders could not fill out his jumpsuit, leaned in to confidently answer the judge's questions. The judge asked Coburg if he wanted to represent himself or have a court-appointed attorney, and he calmly and confidently replied, "I have court-appointed counsel." Charges were read for the slaughters of each student. The judge said that each victim was stabbed and slaughtered with premeditation, with malice, and forethought. Families were overcome with emotions as their child's name was read. Number 2, his DNA was found on the sheath of a knife. Listen, I know it's a really bad thing and the crimes are terrible, but how hard is it to take the weapon with you? I mean, like, how do people get caught leaving their weapon at the scene of the crime? If you know, let me know in the comments below, because last time I asked this, you guys actually didn't really say much. According to the affidavit, which was reviewed by People, a sheath of the knife used in the slaughters was left at the scene of the crime in the bed where Mogan and Gonsalves were found. The affidavit states that this is where detectives found DNA linking Coburg, which they then matched to trash taken from Coburg's parents' home in Pennsylvania. The affidavit also alleged that around 4:20 a.m. on the night of the ending, a white sedan referred to as Suspect Vehicle 1 in the affidavit was seen leaving the area of the home at a fast rate of speed. The document also stated that the vehicle and phone associated with Coburg returned to the scene of the crime between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning. Additionally, the affidavit alleged that while investigating previous cell phone pings, authorities learned that the cell phone associated with Coburg pinged in the area of the 1122 King Road home where the endings took place on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days, the affidavit read. Which I said earlier, but I wanted to reinstate it just so you guys get the picture. Number 1, his personality changed. Joey Famolaro had Coburg as a teaching assistant in one of her classes at Washington State, and previously spoke about her experiences with him on TikTok. She recalled that Coburg was a tough grader early in the semester, but that his behavior changed after November 12, 2022, when the executions occurred. She noted that there were no real red flags about him and that her class of 150 students didn't see him very often, but explained after November 12th, his behavior changed significantly. Famolaro noted that in October, Coburg had failed all of his students on a test and left several comments on their work. Then, starting November and December, he started just handing out hundreds and leaving very minimal comments, she said. So that was, I think, probably the biggest behavior change. It seems he had his mind busy with other things. Number 10. I haven't blocked out the past. I wouldn't trade the person I am or what I've done or the people I've known for anything, so I do think about it. And at times it's a rather mellow trip to lay back and remember. Ted Bundy is notoriously a ruthless man. Even in this quote, he seems to be thinking fondly about his executions. One of the biggest ways to identify someone as having sociopathic tendencies is to determine their relationship to feelings and emotions. When Bundy says it's a rather mellow trip to lay back and remember, he isn't talking about some trip to Florence or something. He's talking about the ecstatic feeling when he committed the executions. He feels nothing but mellow for the crimes he's committed. This is reinforced in number 9. I don't feel guilty for anything. I feel sorry for people who feel guilt. This proves that Ted Bundy is remorseless. A person who is remorseless doesn't feel any guilt. If you're remorseless, you don't feel bad at all, even if you've done something terrible. When someone is remorseless, that person has no feeling of pity for people who have been hurt. The night before his execution, Bundy confessed to 30 of his crimes, but the true total remains unknown. Published estimates have run as high as 100 or more, and Bundy occasionally made cryptic comments to encourage that speculation. He told Ainsworth in 1980 that for every execution publicized, there could be one that was not. When FBI agents proposed a total tally of 36, Bundy responded, "Add one digit to that, and you'll have it." It seemed like Bundy had no care for anything. turning the entire tragedy into a game for the FBI and the public. Both have called him evil before. He didn't believe he was. At number 8, Ted Bundy said this: "Society wants to believe it can identify evil people, or bad or harmful people. But it's not practical. There are no stereotypes." This quote is like a twisted and malformed version of the classic idiom, "the world isn't black or white." When Bundy says there are no stereotypes, he is trying to shame the media. The public who scorns him detests his very existence. He shames the articles depicting him as the devil or as an evil person. Think about that for a moment. Ted Bundy, infamous executioner, bringer of self-righteous despair, feels so little for his actions that he is shaming the people who identify him as evil. Another interesting facet of this quote is him saying, "It's not practical." Of course, any common sociopath doesn't feel guilt or remorse. Instead, they think in practicality. It's them or me. At number 7, what's one less person on the face of the earth anyways? With this quote, it's easy to derive what Bundy thought about what he was doing. In the United States, between the years 1974 and 1978, 16,131,855 people were recorded as born. Those years are significant, as those are the years Bundy was active. He knew how many people were born every day. He knew they had ties to families and friends. He just didn't care. In the grand scheme of things, to him, it was just one life out of billions. Millions of people pass away each year, each month, each day. What's one more? In a vast universe, millions of galaxies and systems and stars and planets, what could the effect of one man with a knife produce? Why would it matter? To him, it doesn't matter. At number 6, execution is not just a crime of lust or violence. It becomes possession. They are part of you. The victim becomes a part of you, and you two are forever one. And the grounds where you remove them or leave them become sacred to you, and you will always be drawn back to them. This explanation is especially interesting, as it might have revealed something about the thought processes of other criminals of the same caliber. Many criminals are arrested or found at the scene of the crime or around it. It seems Bundy was right about that. It's a sacred place, the place where you permanently implemented someone into your story. At number 5, those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular adult media violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We're your sons, and we are your husbands, and we grew up in regular families. And adult media can reach out and snatch a kid out of any house today. It snatched me out of my home 20, 30 years ago. Interestingly, Bundy actually blames adulterated content for how he turned out, though I suppose it makes sense why he blamed that instead of himself. After all, to him, it could never be himself. Addiction to adult content has been rising in recent times, and nowadays there are resources to help quell the urges. However, back in the 60s and 70s, it was most likely very stigmatized by society. At number 4, when you feel the last bit of breath leaving their body, you're looking into their eyes. A person in that situation is God. Bundy made it clear how intimate he feels with the victim before, after, and during his execution of them. Narcissistic personality disorder, the proper term for some who have a God complex, is a rare mental disorder characterized by an inflated sense of self-importance, entitlement, a deep need for admiration, and an alarming lack of empathy for other people. Executioners like Bundy see themselves as better than everyone else, thinking of themselves as gods amongst men, worthy of taking out anyone who opposes them. These are the most dangerous people in the world, the ones that believe they run it. At number 3, I don't think anybody doubts whether I've done some bad things. The question is what, of course, and how, and maybe even most importantly, why? It seems Bundy contradicts his previous quote, the one where he says, "Society wants to believe it can identify evil people, or bad or harmful people, but it's not practical." He outright admits to have done bad things, which raises more questions than answers. He again toys with the interviewer, asking questions to the interviewer from a third-person perspective of himself. These really are the most important questions, but Bundy has no real intention of answering them in this interview. Aside from that, perhaps Bundy believes that society has no right to call individuals bad people or evil, and it is left up to the individual to decide that for themselves. Either way, Bundy admits to doing bad things. At number 2, I understand now a lot of stuff about myself that I didn't understand then. It makes me realize what was going on. The senselessness of it appalls me, although I'm sure not so much as those who were so close to it. This quote is confusing for several reasons. He states how the senselessness of it all appalled him, but does that mean he is remorseful and regretting of his actions? Or is he referring to how convoluted his executions were, wishing he'd been cleaner with them? I interpret this as him noticing how close to the electric chair he truly is, wishing he had been a better and more efficient criminal. I believe Bundy wanted to do more with his life and less in others. At number 1, after his last meal, steak and eggs, Bundy was sent to the parish chamber on the morning of January 24th, 1989. When asked if he had any last words, he said, Jim and Fred, I'd like you to give my love to my family and friends. After that, he was executed via the electric chair. Jim Coleman was Bundy's defense attorney, and Fred Lawrence was his minister. They had both spent a considerable amount of time with Ted Bundy. The story of Ted Bundy is one of tragedy and insanity, one that I hope isn't recreated in the future. Stay safe out there. Number 10, BTK. The BTK had to report his thoughts on the case to TMZ because no one else would listen. The BTK serial ender seems to be shocked in either a good way or a bad way, I can't tell, that Bryan Kohberger shares some of his traits and that one of his own attacks, a quadruple termination, is scarily similar to the Idaho student slayings. Dennis Rader, who gave himself the nickname BTK, told TMZ in a new email he believes Coburger would lie in wait for his victims, stalking them and casing their home. All of this, BTK says, was much like I did, referencing Coburger's dark mind, which he can relate to. BTK also pointed out chilling parallels between his brutal 1974 termination of the Otero family in Kansas and the 4 slain University of Idaho students whom Coburger has been charged with fatally stabbing in an off-campus home. And 4, much like the Oteros, up close and personal stabbed, BTK wrote, although he asphyxiated 4 Otero family members after tying them up in their Wichita house. He went on to mention that Coburger left DNA at the crime scene just like he did at the Otero house, leaving his fluids on one of the victim's body. It took police years to link BTK to the crimes after advancement in DNA technology. However, Coburger was soon connected to the Idaho terminations after his DNA was found on a knife sheath, cops said. It seems Coburger is following in the footsteps of BTK, and BTK seems almost proud. That's creepy. Number 9, he might have been trying to solve his own crime. The man charged with slaughtering 4 Idaho college students may have joined online chat groups to discuss some of the facts of the brutal slayings with internet sleuths. Bryan Kohberger might have been the person or persons making claims about the quadruple execution case, using the Facebook and Redditor handles Papa Roger and Inside Looking, respectively, according to former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer. Coffindaffer, who is tracking both accounts, says many of the allegations made by the individual turned out to be factually accurate, causing her to think it could have been Bryan. In 2 of the postings, the person or persons offered a correct timeline for the executions and mentioned the knife sheath left at the crime scene before police publicly released those details. Here's what one of the messages said, this time coming from the Inside Looking account. Speculation. Butcher parked behind the house, approached property from the tree line, entered sliding door and left it open, committed executions and exited sliding door. 1 knife according to coroner's statement. Time of slaying approximately 3:20 in the morning to 3:40 in the morning according to car fleeing scene and on camera on Highway 8 approximately 3:45 in the morning. Vehicle left skid marks upon exit. Multiple details starting from when the user mentioned the butcher committed the executions then fled from the sliding door were correct. One user wrote underneath the Reddit post that the dude is solving his own crime and that he's a psycho, followed by a couple of emojis. Number 8, Coburger might have been bullied. Or was he the bully? At least one individual who knew Coburger when they were really young recalled Coburger as being quiet but friendly, and that he was bullied by peers over his weight. He was bullied a lot. It started because of his weight, and it was mainly by females. He was pretty big. Sarah Healy, who attended elementary, middle, and high school with Coburger in Pleasant Valley, Pennsylvania, told People magazine. He was very quiet, very to himself. He was very into his books, and he was really sweet and really quiet. Others who knew Coburger didn't recall him being bullied at all. Casey Arntz, who was 2 years ahead of Coburger in high school in Pleasant Valley, said he didn't remember Coburger ever being bullied and alleged that while Coburger was always nice to her, he actually bullied her brother at times. I know that he had anger issues and he would have outbursts and stuff. I never saw them face to face. My brother said that when Bryan would get angry with him, he would kind of gaslight him and get physically aggressive. Bryan never got physically aggressive with my brother, but he was kind of the person who would smash things or punch a wall or something like that. Makes sense why he would hide this from the police, as being bullied might have been a motive for this crime. Number 7, he might have been close friends with a needle. Several of Coburger's classmates from his teens recalled him using a substance in a needle, with some alleging that Coburger offered the substance to others before he went to rehab in 2013. Lee Mack, who graduated from Pleasant Valley High School in 2012, told People that she befriended Coburger after meeting him at a party. Brian never gave off red flags that I knew of. He was always weird, but what teenage kid who's trying to find himself isn't weird, you know? She said, noting that Coburg briefly joined her friend group, but then they grew apart after Coburg allegedly offered another friend a substance. He offered my best friend a substance in a needle, and we just realized he was a little bit more far gone than we had expected to deal with, and so we had to end our friendship, Max said. She added that Coburg later reached out to her 2 years after graduation. He said, "Hey, I'm getting clean. I want to do something really good for my life and for people." Number 6, he has a psychology degree. This might be why he could have been in those crime group chats, trying to solve his own crime. He might have been studying his own psychology to find and remove his imperfections. Coburg earned a bachelor's degree in psychology at a local community college near his eastern Pennsylvania hometown, the New York Times reported. Jack Bayless, who befriended Coburg in 8th grade, told People magazine that Coburg was very interested in psychology as a teen. He is super curious, probably the most curious person who you'll ever meet. Guaranteed, Bayless said. He was really into psychology, how people thought and whatnot. He's always been really into that kind of stuff. If you're like, oh, why do people like this? Why do men blah blah blah? Or why do women blah blah blah? He'd get all into those kinds of things and wondering differences between just how different people think and all that, Bayless added. Reconciling the idea that his childhood friend is accused of ending 4 young adults hasn't been easy. Bayless, who last saw Coburg in 2021 when they shot airsoft guns at each other, explained, "He's always been nice to me, always friendly to me. Never seemed like a bad guy," Bayless said. "I hope he's innocent. I hope it was anyone else, because you don't want your friend to have been a butcher. It's not fun." Number 5, he has a master's in criminal justice. DeSales University confirmed in a statement that Coburg was an alum. Coburg received a bachelor's degree in 2020 and completed his graduate studies in June 2022. A message on the university website read, Coburg received a master's degree in criminal justice. We are devastated by this senseless tragedy. We also recognize the impact this news can have on our community's well-being. DeSales has expanded counseling services for students, faculty, and staff, the statement continued. As a Catholic Salesian community, we extend deep sympathy and prayers to the family and friends of the victims. While studying at DeSales, Coburg posted a since-deleted call on Reddit for ex-convicts to participate in what he said was a study sanctioned by the university on how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime. One of his classmates at DeSales, Brittany Slavin, told the New York Times that Coburg seemed rather interested in serial slaughterers and developing theories on what happened at crime scenes based on photos presented in class, but this behavior didn't raise any flags for her at the time. At the time, it seemed as if he was just a curious student. So if his questions felt odd, we didn't think much of it because it fit our curriculum, she explained. Casey Arntz recalled Coburg being interested in criminal justice when he was still in high school, but she believed his addiction delayed his plans to go to college to study the subject. He definitely was interested in criminal justice back then, she said, and I'm seeing from other people now that from former friends and acquaintances and even teachers that said he was always interested in it and he loved crime movies and TV shows and stuff like that. Number 4, he was warned by a bar. Several months ago, Coburg was warned about his interactions with women working and frequenting a bar in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Jordan Sorolnik, the owner of Seven Sirens Brewing Company, told NBC News. Sorolnik explains that the bar staff scan IDs of all patrons and that they can add notes that pop up in their internal system. Staff put in there, "Hey, this guy makes creepy comments, keep an eye on him. He'll have 2 or 3 beers and then just get a little too comfortable," Sorolnik recalled. The brewery owner added that Coburg would often sit alone at the bar, observing and watching other patrons, and that he asked female staff and customers questions about where they lived and who they were at the bar with. Sorolnik said that if women weren't interested in conversing with Coburg, he would get upset with them a little bit, and that Coburg called a female staffer a B-word when she wouldn't answer his questions. Sorolnik said of his final interaction with Coburg, "I went up to him and I said, 'Hey Brian, welcome back. We appreciate you coming back. I just wanted to tell you real quick and make sure that you're going to be respectful this time and we're not going to have any issues.'" Sorolnik said that Coburg seemed shocked at his remarks and told the owner, "I don't know what you're talking about. You totally have me confused." Sorolnik says that Coburg never returned to the bar after that conversation. Number 3, he was pulled over on a road trip twice. After Coburg was arrested, body camera footage was released that showed him getting pulled over twice in one day while on a cross-country road trip from Washington to Pennsylvania with his father. Coburg was driving a white Hyundai Elantra, the same vehicle authorities were searching for in connection with the case, and the same vehicle my friend Ahmed calls the Batmobile. To be fair, his car is pretty fast and it's blacked out. He was stopped both times for following a vehicle too closely. He was released with a verbal warning on both occasions, and after Coburg's arrest, the vehicle was taken from his family home. At the time of the traffic stop, there was no information available on a suspect for the crimes in Idaho, to include identifying information or any specific information related to the license plate state or number of the white Hyundai Elantra, which was being reported in the media to have been seen in and around where the crime occurred. The Hancock County Sheriff's Office said in a statement obtained by multiple outlets. What are the chances, eh? Number 2, his DNA was found on the sheath of a knife. Listen, I know it's a really bad thing and the crimes are terrible, but how hard is it to take the weapon with you? How do people actually get caught leaving their weapon at the crime scene? If you know, let me know in the comments below. According to the affidavit, which was reviewed by People, a sheath of the knife used in the executions was left at the scene in the bed where Mogan and Gonsalves were found. The affidavit states that this is where detectives found DNA linking Coburg, which they then matched to trash taken from Coburg's parents' home in Pennsylvania. The affidavit also alleged that around 4:20 a.m. on the night of the execution, a white sedan referred to as Suspect Vehicle 1 in the affidavit was seen leaving the area of the home at a fast rate of speed. The document also stated that the vehicle and phone associated with Coburg returned to the crime scene between 9:12 in the morning and 9:21 in the morning. Additionally, the affidavit alleged that while investigating previous cell phone pings, authorities learned that the cell phone associated with Coburg pinged in the area of 1122 King Road home, where the executions took place on at least 12 occasions prior to November 13th, 2022. All of these occasions, except for one, occurred in the late evening and early morning hours of their respective days, the affidavit read. Number 1, his personality changed. Joey Famularo had Coburg as a teaching assistant in one of her classmates at Washington State, and previously spoke about her experiences with him on TikTok. She recalled that Coburg was a tough grader early in the semester, but that his behavior changed after November 12, 2022, when the executions occurred. She noted that there was no real red flags about him and that her class of 150 students didn't see him very often, but explained after November 12th his behavior suddenly changed significantly. Famularo noted that in October, Coburg had failed all of his students on a test and left several comments on their work. Then, starting November and December, he started just handing out hundreds and leaving very minimal comments, she said. So that was, I think, probably the biggest behavior change. It seems he had his mind busy with other things. Number 10. He was always fascinated by terminating things. Edmund Emil Kemper III, born on December 18, 1948, had a contentious relationship with his beverage-addicted mother, Clarnell Strandberg, who moved him and his 2 sisters from Burbank, California to Montana after she divorced his father in 1957. He showed signs of severe mental disturbance from an early age, when he would cut off the heads of his sisters' dolls and even coerced his sisters into playing a game called Gas Chamber, in which he had them blindfold him and lead him to a chair where he pretended to writhe in agony until he passed away. At 10, he buried one of the family cats alive, and at 13, he ended another with a knife. Abuse of animals is a really early sign of psychopathy, so if you know any scumbag that does those things to animals, then keep a distance and maybe tell someone you trust.
It started with surrogates at a non-human level. Physical objects, my possessions, other people's, destruction of things that are cared about. And then destruction of things that are living on a lower level, small animals, insects, animals, and then finally people.
Number 9, he ended his own grandparents. After sending him to live with his father, briefly in the hopes this would cure his behavior,
I wanted to be with my father, and I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head.
His mother tried passing him on to live with his paternal grandparents in North Fork, California, hoping they could be of more help to him. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been more wrong. After a fight with his grandmother in 1964, then 15-year-old Kemper shot and ended her in the kitchen, and when his grandfather returned to the house, he shot and ended him too. He later explained to authorities that he removed his grandmother to see what it felt like, and that he terminated his grandfather so he wouldn't have to grieve the loss of his wife.
And then a month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them.
Sounds like he thinks it was a service to his grandfather to remove him from the world. Kemper's crimes were deemed incomprehensible for a 15-year-old to commit, and court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. He was sent to Atascadero State Hospital, a maximum security facility in San Luis Obispo County that houses mentally ill convicts.
And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me.
Number 8, he tricked several medical professionals. Following the slaughter of his grandparents, a variety of tests led to his being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and sent to Atascadero State Mental Hospital, a maximum security facility for mentally ill convicts. When he was released at the age of 21, the professionals at the hospital declared him to be a perfect example of the benefits of rehabilitating youthful offenders. This statement, written by his probation officer upon completion of the program, makes this painfully clear. If I were to see this patient without having any history available or getting any history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illness. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be any danger to himself or to another member of society. And since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. Number 7, he was a state trooper. In 1969, at the age of 21, Kemper was released from Atascadero State Mental Hospital, where he had been committed following the slaughter of his grandparents. He attended community college in the hopes of bettering himself, all the while still living with his mother. He desperately wanted to be a state trooper, however, he was not accepted to train. Oddly enough, this wasn't because he had been hospitalized following the execution of his grandparents, but because at 6'9" and 300 pounds, he was just too big and too tall. In fact, following his release and after some urging from his mother, Kemper's juvenile record was erased, leaving the troopers with no idea of his previous crimes. Kemper was released on parole on his 21st birthday. Then he went on an 11-month removal spree targeting women. Between May 1972 and April 1973, Kemper butchered 5 college students, a high school student, his mother, and her best friend. He severed the heads of all of his victims except that of his mother's best friend, whom he strangled April 20th, 1973, to support a made-up story that she and his mother had gone away on vacation together. Kemper, who became known as the Co-Ed Butcher, was arrested 4 days later after he drove to Pueblo, Colorado and called the police from a phone booth to confess. Number 6, he tricked people by being in a rush.
Elaborate precautions. He drove around universities and picked up hitchhiking co-eds while wearing these glasses.
Yeah. These are the ones. Now, would you get in the car with this man? Huh?
With no work prospects on the horizon, he became bored with his existence once again, and as we know from his previous crimes, a bored psychopath is a dangerous thing. Instead, he turned his attention to the high number of female hitchhikers in the area. In 1972, Kemper slaughtered 18-year-old Mary Ann Pesci, 18-year-old Anita Luchessa, and Aiko Koo. In 1973, he slaughtered 19-year-old Cindy Shaw, 23-year-old Rosalind Thorpe, and 21-year-old Alice Liu. He had convinced the young co-eds, who were all in the prime of their lives, that he was not a threat to them, by using a cunning trick to get them into his car. Kemper said, "Some girls weren't really convinced, so I looked at my watch and I sighed, like, come on, I don't have time." And that convinced them. They had the impression I was in a hurry and didn't have time to hurt them. Number 5. He wasn't the only active butcher in the area. Edmund Kemper was not the only active serial butcher in the Santa Cruz area in the early 1970s. 2 other men, Herbert Mullen and John Linley Frazier, were also active in the area. The police even suspected Mullen of having ended 2 of Kemper's victims, while Kemper was initially a suspect in one of Mullen's executions. The police definitely had several investigative issues related to the 3 executioners at the time. Mullen and Kemper both ended people in very gruesome ways, and Mullen was eventually convicted on 10 counts of slaughter, in which he was sentenced to life in prison. The 2 serial butchers also had some interaction while in custody. While in neighboring jail cells, Kemper performed what he called behavior modification treatment on Mullen by giving him peanuts whenever Mullen was good. He sometimes bothered other prisoners by singing, so Kemper splashed water on him. Mullen is still incarcerated and not eligible for parole until 2021. John Linley Frazier was a mass terminator who shot and ended a doctor, his wife, 2 sons, and the doctor's secretary, which led to his conviction and execution sentence in 1971. After California abolished the execution penalty in 1972, his sentence was commuted to life in prison. His odd religious behavior was revealed in the note he left behind at the slaughters, part of which said, "From this day forward, anyone and or everyone or company of persons who misuses the natural environment or destroys same will suffer the penalty of demise by the people of the free universe. I and my comrades from this day forth will fight until demise or freedom against anyone who does not support natural life on this planet. Materialism must go, or mankind will stop." He was found passed away hanging in his cell in 2009 at the age of 63. Number 4, he ended his mother in the most gruesome way.
He was released to the one person that authorities at the state mental hospital recommended he never see again.
The rage and disdain Kemper felt for his mother finally reached a boiling point in April 1973. On Good Friday, his mother returned home after a night of drinking and began arguing with her son. Kemper then entered her bedroom and bludgeoned her with a hammer before cutting her throat with a knife. He then decapitated the body and later revealed he pinned the head against the wall and screamed at it for an hour whilst throwing darts. He also confessed to ripping out her voice box, which he deemed appropriate as she yelled and screamed at him so much over the years. After hiding the body parts around the house, his mother's close friend came over to the house too, and he strangled her. Later, he said, "I certainly wanted for my mother a nice, quiet, easy passing like everyone else wants." Kemper targeted women as they reminded him of his mother and his overall hatred for women. He stabbed or strangled his victims and would later decapitate or dismember the corpses. Several discarded body parts were found washed up on the shore, and he buried a head in his mother's backyard. The other heads he kept as sickening serial butcher trophies.
Ed Kemper has been serving a life sentence in this California prison since 1973.
Number 3, he confessed to the police.
During that time, I become engaged to someone who's young and is beautiful and very much the same advantages and very much the same upbringing and Disneyland values. And she's very much the reason I surrendered.
On Easter Sunday 1973, Kemper fled his mother's home following her slaughter and made his way to Colorado. He realized it would not be long before the crime was linked to him, so he rang the police back in Santa Cruz to make a full confession. Initially, the police did not believe his confession or were convinced they had finally caught the feared co-ed butcher. Kemper was close friends with the local police, often drinking with them in bars and restaurants. They referred to him as Big Ed and had revealed to him over the time a lot about the slaughters, which allowed him to anticipate their next move in the investigation. They believed this was all one big prank from a friend that had become known as a friendly giant. Kemper waited for an officer to arrive and arrest him. He was considered legally sane, and when asked what he believed was an appropriate punishment for his crime, he replied execution by torture. Number 2, he scared an FBI agent. Stanford psychiatrist Donald Lunde interviewed Kemper from 1972 to 1973. The guards would lock them both in a small room, and a panic button under the table would alert them when they finished. Lunde said, "I laughed at the notion that he might attack me. He had no reason to do so, and besides, the panic button would bring a squad of deputies instantly." Kemper then reminded Lunde, "Has it ever dawned on you that I'm a foot taller and weigh damn near twice as you?" When Lunde hit that panic button, it took 7 minutes for the guards to respond. Former FBI agent Robert K. Ressler had a similar interaction with Kemper. Bundled in the same interview room, Ressler hit the panic button and the guards didn't respond. Noticing his panic, Kemper chillingly told him, "If I went ape in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guard." The guards entered the room 30 minutes later. That's scary. Number 1, he's still alive today. On November 8, 1973, Kemper was found guilty of first-degree execution. He was sentenced to life behind bars and is currently imprisoned at the California Medical Facility. Since 1977, he has spent his time recording audiobooks and loaned his voice to Flowers in the Attic, The Glass Key, and The Rosary Slaughters, to name a few. He spent more than 5,000 hours in the recording booth at the prison and has received 2 awards for his efforts. However, the serial butcher has no desire to leave prison, as he's quite content living out the rest of his life behind bars. Since 1985, he has waived his right to parole hearings. In 2017, this is his belief. No one's ever going to let him out, and he's just happy. He's just as happy going about his life in prison. In his 70s, he will spend the rest of his days in prison and, at the time of writing, in relatively good health. Kemper has outlived his victims by decades.